Betrayal doesn't scream. It whispers, soft and insidious, until the truth slices through like a blade. Nate Harper learned this the hard way in Seattle, where rain-soaked streets hid secrets as easily as they reflected the city's neon glow. Once a hacker prodigy who could have owned Silicon Valley, he traded fame for love, building a life with Emily West, a rising star at Horizon Tech whose ambition outshone the Space Needle itself. Nate, 34, was no ordinary IT consultant. His code had once exposed a multimillion-dollar fraud for a Fortune 500 client, but he'd stepped back from the spotlight to support Emily's legal career. Their Belltown penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and Puget Sound views, was a testament to their shared dream, or so he thought. Lately, Emily's late nights had grown frequent, her phone buzzing with messages she dismissed as client emergencies. Her perfume, once floral, now carried a faint citrus tang that wasn't hers. Nate noticed but said nothing. Love, he told himself, meant trust. The first crack appeared on a drizzly Tuesday. Emily handed him a navy blazer, asking him to drop it at the dry cleaner on his way to a client meeting. "Just a quick errand, babe," she said, her smile as polished as her courtroom delivery. At the cleaner's, an older woman with a smoker's rasp squinted at the ticket. "This was picked up last week. Guy in a gray suit, black SUV. Paid cash." Nate's stomach twisted. "That's impossible," he said, forcing a laugh. "She gave it to me this morning." The woman shrugged, her eyes already back on her crossword. He drove home in silence, the blazer folded neatly on the passenger seat. Emily's lie wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. That night, she came home at 11 p.m., her hair slightly mussed, claiming a last-minute deposition. Nate poured her a glass of Pinot Noir, his hands steady, and asked about her day. She rattled off buzzwords: filings, partners, billable hours, while her phone stayed face down on the counter. When she stepped into the shower, Nate glanced at her Apple Watch, left charging by the sink. A notification from David Crow, her boss, flashed, "See you tomorrow. Can't wait." The words weren't explicit, but they burned. Nate didn't confront her. He wasn't the type to shout or slam doors. Instead, he started watching. Over the next week, he noticed patterns. Emily's conferences that didn't appear on her shared calendar, the way she switched to Signal for client privacy, the faint scent of expensive cologne on her scarf. He began collecting evidence, not out of paranoia but necessity. Screenshots of late-night texts. A hotel receipt slipped into her purse, time-stamped when she was supposedly in Portland. Each fragment was a puzzle piece, and Nate was too good at puzzles to ignore them. Then came the blow that turned suspicion into certainty. Emily had pitched a cybersecurity protocol to Horizon Tech's board, earning her a fast track to partner. Nate recognized the framework. It was a project he'd shared with her over coffee 6 months ago, assuming it was just pillow talk. She'd passed it off as her own, and worse, she'd blamed Nate for a data leak to cover her tracks. A colleague tipped him off. "They're saying you mishandled a server audit. Emily didn't defend you." The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional, a calculated move to bury him while she climbed. Nate sat in his home office that night, the city's skyline a cold constellation beyond the glass. He opened his laptop, pulling up a hidden folder labeled Backup_23. Inside were the scraps of Emily's deceit. Emails to David, vague but intimate. Bank transfers tied to Horizon's consulting fees. A photo of Emily in a conference room after hours, her smile too relaxed for a work meeting. But there was more. David wasn't just her lover. He was funneling money through shell companies, and Emily was signing the paperwork to keep it quiet. She wasn't just cheating on Nate. She was complicit in fraud. He leaned back, the weight of it settling like damp Seattle fog. Confronting her would be easy, but it wouldn't be enough. Emily and David thought they could rewrite his story, cast him as the fool who trusted too much. They were wrong. Nate wasn't a fool. He was a man who'd once hacked a bank's firewall in under an hour for a client who paid in stock options. He closed the laptop, his reflection sharp in the screen. This wasn't the end of their marriage. It was the start of something else entirely, a reckoning that would unfold on his terms. Humiliation doesn't need a spotlight. It thrives in the flicker of chandelier light, where polished smiles cut deeper than knives. Nate Harper felt this at the West family estate in Bellevue, a sprawling monument to old money that sneered at his existence. He'd come at Emily's insistence, but as he stepped into the lion's den, he realized love had lured him into a trap. The West mansion, nestled among manicured pines, was less a home than a stage. Marble floors gleamed under vaulted ceilings, and every painting screamed lineage, stern-faced ancestors glaring from gilded frames. Emily's mother, Ellen, greeted Nate with a nod so curt it felt like a dismissal. Her brother, Tyler, a hedge fund bro with a Rolex that cost more than Nate's car, smirked as he shook his hand. Still tinkering with computers, Nate? Or have you graduated to fixing printers? The room chuckled, and Emily, radiant in a cream silk dress, offered no defense, her eyes fixed on her wine glass. Dinner was a gauntlet. The table, set with crystal and silver, stretched like a battlefield. Ellen presided at the head, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that came from generations of untouchable wealth. Tyler lobbed jabs between bites of truffle-glazed salmon. Nate, you ever think about a real career? Something with a corner office. The guests, cousins, family, friends, a smattering of Seattle's elite, laughed lightly, their amusement a velvet glove over a fist. Nate kept his composure, his tech contracts worth millions a secret he didn't owe them. He'd learned long ago that the West didn't value actual success, only the kind that came with a trust fund and a last name. Emily sat beside him, her hand brushing his under the table, but it felt rehearsed, like a politician's gesture. She laughed at Tyler's barbs, her polished chuckle signaling she was in on the joke. Nate tried to shift the mood, raising his glass for a toast. To family, he said, his voice steady. For keeping us grounded, no matter where we come from. The room fell silent. Tyler snorted, leaning back in his chair. Grounded? Nate, you're here because Emily took pity on a charity case. Laughter erupted, sharp and brittle, like glass breaking in slow motion. Emily's lips tightened, but she said nothing, her gaze dropping to her plate. Nate's chest burned, not with anger but with clarity. He saw it now. Emily wasn't just complicit in her family's cruelty. She was its beneficiary. Every jab Tyler landed, every cold glance from Ellen, was a reminder of the role she'd cast him in. The outsider who should be grateful for a seat at their table. He excused himself, claiming a headache, and retreated to the guest room. A sterile shrine of floral wallpaper and antique furniture that felt like a museum to someone else's past. Emily followed an hour later, her heels clicking on the hardwood. You're overreacting, she said, arms crossed. Her voice a practiced blend of concern and irritation. It's just how they are. You know that. Nate sat on the edge of the bed, his khakis creased from the drive. How they are, he repeated, is treating me like a punchline, and you let them. Her eyes narrowed. Don't make this a thing, Nate. You embarrassed me tonight with that toast. It was awkward. Awkward. He stood, his voice low but sharp. Your brother called me a charity case in front of 20 people, and you laughed. Your mother looks at me like I'm the help. And you're worried about awkward. Emily sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You're being dramatic. They're my family. If you can't handle a few jokes, maybe you don't belong here. The words landed like a slap, but it was her next ones that drew blood. Apologize to them tomorrow or leave. I won't let you ruin this weekend. Nate stared at her, the woman he'd once stayed up with until dawn, debugging code while she studied for the bar exam. He'd sacrificed a shot at a tech startup for her, moved to Seattle for her, believed in her. Now her diamond ring caught the light, mocking him. "You've drawn a line," he said quietly, "and I'm not crossing it." Emily's face hardened, but she didn't respond, turning to the bathroom with the faucet's hiss as her only reply. At 1:47 a.m., Nate made his choice. He packed his duffel, jeans, laptop, a single photo of them from better days, which he left on the nightstand. The mansion was silent as he slipped through its corridors, past the portraits that seemed to judge his every step. Tyler's Porsche gleamed in the driveway next to Nate's beat-up Subaru, a final jab at his place in their world. He slid into the driver's seat, the engine's hum a quiet rebellion. As he pulled onto the winding road, the estate's lights faded in his rearview mirror. He wasn't running away, he was rewriting the script. Nate drove through the night, Seattle's skyline giving way to the open highway. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew what he was leaving. A marriage built on lies, a family that saw him as less, and a version of himself that had played their game too long. In his bag, the laptop held his backup_23 folder, a digital arsenal of Emily's betrayal and David's crimes. This wasn't over. The Wests thought they'd broken him, but Nate Harper was just getting started. Freedom tastes like salt air and cheap coffee, but it's forged in silence, where plans take shape like code compiling in the dark. Nate Harper found this in Portland, a city of gray skies and second chances, where he could vanish into the noise of his own making. He wasn't hiding, he was building, line by line, a reckoning that would rewrite the story Emily West thought she controlled. Nate's new home was a loft above a used bookstore in Old Town, its creaking floors and cracked windows a far cry from the Belltown penthouse. The rent was low, the Wi-Fi spotty, but it was his. No West family portraits judging him, no Emily's rehearsed sighs filling the air. He furnished it with a second-hand desk, a mattress, and a single monitor that glowed like a beacon in the night. Portland's pulse, food trucks, buskers, the distant hum of the Willamette River, felt like a heartbeat he could finally match. He'd chosen this city not for its charm but for its anonymity, a place where a man could disappear and still command the digital world. By day, Nate buried himself in freelance work. His contracts with tech firms in San Francisco and Austin brought in six figures, enough to fund his quiet life and then some. Clients didn't care that he worked from a loft that smelled of old books and sea breeze. They cared that his code was flawless, his deadlines surgical. But when the sun dipped below the horizon, Nate opened his backup_23 folder, a digital vault of Emily's lies and David Crow's crimes. It wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon, and he was sharpening it with care. The folder had grown since Seattle. Screenshots of Emily's signal chats with David, vague but damning. "Need you tonight," board meetings a cover. Bank records showing Horizon Tech's consulting fees funneled to offshore accounts, with Emily's signature on the approvals. A photo of her at a hotel bar, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. Nate traced the money, his hacker instincts kicking in. David wasn't just cheating with Emily. He was laundering millions through shell companies, and she was his shield, burying the paper trail for a shot at partner. But there was more. A deleted email Nate recovered from Emily's old laptop backup. She'd threatened a colleague, Sarah Lynn, with exposing a minor compliance error unless Sarah backed her promotion. Emily wasn't just complicit. She was ruthless. Nate leaned back in his chair, the monitor's glow casting shadows on the wall. He could send the evidence now, HR, the press, David's wife, and watch Horizon Tech burn. But that was too easy, too sloppy. He needed precision, a strike that would dismantle their world without leaving his fingerprints. He reached out to Zach Delaney, a journalist he'd known from his hacking days. Zach had broken a story on corporate fraud years ago, thanks to Nate's anonymous tip. Now, Nate sent him an encrypted message. "Got something big. Horizon Tech. You in?" Zach's reply came hours later. "Risky. Need more than screenshots. Can you meet?" Nate hesitated. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but Zach was his best shot at amplifying the truth. He started planning. Using a VPN and a burner email, Nate dug deeper into Horizon's servers, exploiting a backdoor he'd found during a routine audit for them months ago. He pulled financial logs, internal memos, even David's private calendar, meetings with Emily that didn't match her work trips. Every piece was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Nate was weaving it with the patience of a man who'd once spent 72 hours cracking a bank's encryption for a client. But doubt crept in. Late at night, staring at the ceiling, he saw Emily's face. Not the cold lawyer who'd betrayed him, but the woman who'd laughed with him at 3 a.m. over burnt pizza, promising they'd conquer the world together. Had that been real, or just another line in her script? To ground himself, Nate walked Portland's streets, the drizzle a constant companion. He stopped at a food cart run by a guy named Leo, who served burnt coffee with a grin. "You look like you're carrying the world, man," Leo said one morning, sliding a cup across the counter. Nate smiled faintly. "Just debugging some code." Leo laughed, unaware that Nate's code was a plan to topple an empire. Those walks cleared his mind, reminding him why he'd left. Not to sulk, but to reclaim the man he'd been before Emily's world swallowed him. Back at the loft, Nate refined his strategy. He'd send 2 packages, one to Horizon's HR with enough evidence to trigger an internal probe, another to Zach with a curated dossier for the press. David's wife, Claire, would get a single photo, Emily and David at the hotel, time-stamped. No note, just the truth. But there was a wild card, Sarah Lynn. If Nate exposed Emily's threat against her, Sarah could turn whistleblower, amplifying the fallout. He drafted an anonymous email to her, hesitating over the send button. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, and Sarah deserved a chance to fight back. As dawn broke, painting the loft in soft gray, Nate closed his laptop. The plan was nearly ready, but he wasn't. He needed one more piece, a way to ensure the Wests felt the weight of their own arrogance. He thought of the gala Horizon Tech hosted every year, a glittering showcase of power. If he could time his strike there, the truth wouldn't just whisper, it would roar. Nate sipped his coffee, the bitter taste of promise. Emily and David thought they'd written him out of their story. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Revenge doesn't roar. It hums, a quiet current that electrifies the air before the storm breaks. Nate Harper felt this in Portland's pre-dawn hush, his fingers poised over a keyboard that held the power to unravel empires. Tonight, at Horizon Tech's gala in Seattle, he'd turn whispers of betrayal into a spotlight no one could ignore. The gala was the tech world's Oscars, hosted in a sleek waterfront venue where Seattle's elite mingled under chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Emily West would be there, dazzling in a gown that screamed partner in waiting. David Crow, Horizon's golden boy, would deliver a keynote on ethical innovation, oblivious to the noose tightening around his neck. Nate, 300 miles away in his Old Town loft, wasn't invited. He didn't need to be. His weapon wasn't a guest list, it was code. For weeks, Nate had honed his plan. His backup_23 folder was a masterpiece. Bank records of David's offshore transfers, Emily's signed cover-ups, and a trail of their affair, hotel receipts, late-night texts, a photo of them laughing in a bar, her ring nowhere in sight. He'd also uncovered Emily's threat to Sarah Lynn, a colleague she'd blackmailed for a promotion. Nate's strike would be surgical, exposing their crimes without leaving a trace back to him. He'd used a VPN, burner emails, and a custom script to exploit a flaw in Horizon's event software. Tonight, that flaw would become his stage. At 7 p.m., as guests sipped champagne, Nate initiated the breach. His screen glowed with Horizon's presentation system, hijacked through a backdoor he'd found months ago. He uploaded a single file, a slideshow of evidence, timed to interrupt David's speech. Bank statements, emails, the photo of Emily and David. No commentary, just raw truth. He leaned back, heart pounding, and hit execute. Across the state, the gala's massive LED screen flickered. In Seattle, The crowd murmured as David's slides vanished. A grainy image appeared. Emily and David in a hotel lobby, his arm around her waist. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the bank records, millions funneled through shell companies. Emily's signature glowed on a fraudulent contract. The final slide was Sarah's email, detailing Emily's blackmail. David froze mid-sentence, his face ashen. Emily, standing near the stage, gripped her clutch like a lifeline, her smile crumbling. The room erupted in whispers, phones lighting up as guests texted furiously. Nate watched via a hacked feed from the venue's security cameras. He saw David rush off stage, barking at aides. Emily stood alone, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. The crowd's judgment was merciless. Partners, investors, board members turning away as if she carried a plague. Nate felt no joy, only a cold satisfaction. This wasn't vengeance, it was gravity, pulling their lies to earth. But Emily wasn't done. By midnight, she'd hired a lawyer, spinning a story that Nate had hacked Horizon illegally, framing her to save his own reputation. She fed the narrative to a board member, claiming Nate's data leak was sabotage. The accusation stung, but Nate was ready. He'd sent a second package to Zach Delaney, his journalist friend, days earlier. Zach's article hit the Seattle Times at dawn. Horizon tech exec embroiled in fraud affair. It cited anonymous sources, Nate's dossier, scrubbed of his involvement. The piece detailed David's laundering scheme and Emily's role, with Sarah Lynn's testimony as the clincher. Sarah, emboldened by Nate's anonymous tip, had gone public, accusing Emily of coercion. The fallout was swift. Horizon's board suspended David pending investigation. Emily was placed on leave, her name erased from the company's website. Claire, David's wife, filed for separation, her lawyer citing irreconcilable breaches of trust. Social media exploded, hashtags like #HorizonScandal trending as tech blogs dissected the story. Emily's allies ghosted her, their loyalty as fleeting as her power. The West family, back in Bellevue, unraveled. Ellen called it a smear on our legacy, while Tyler sent Nate a venomous email. "You'll pay for this, hacker boy. Lawyered up yet?" Nate deleted it without replying. They had no proof and he'd left none. In Portland, Nate sipped coffee at Leo's food cart, the morning mist curling around him. "Heard about that tech mess in Seattle?" Leo asked, wiping the counter. "Sounds like someone turned their world upside down." Nate shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, sometimes the truth does that." He walked back to his loft, the city waking around him. His phone buzzed. Zach, texting, "Stories blowing up. You good?" Nate typed back, "Better than ever." He'd done more than expose Emily and David. He'd given Sarah a voice, Claire a way out, and himself a clean slate. But one piece remained. The West's annual gala was weeks away, a chance for Ellen and Tyler to salvage their image. Nate knew they'd paint him as the villain, a jealous ex who'd fabricated a scandal. He wasn't finished. His final move wasn't about destruction. It was about ensuring the truth outlived their lies. He opened his laptop, a new folder labeled Gala_25. The game wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. Truth doesn't need a megaphone. It carves its mark in silence, outlasting the loudest lies. Nate Harper stood on Portland's jagged cliffs, the Pacific's roar a testament to that enduring power. He dismantled Emily West's world not with screams but with keystrokes. And now, as the West family's final act approached, he was ready to close the book on their story and begin his own. The West's annual gala loomed, a glittering affair at Seattle's Bayside Club, where old money polished its tarnished armor. Emily, despite her fall, would attend, clinging to the family name like a life raft. Ellen West, ever the matriarch, had spun a tale of external sabotage to save face, casting Nate as a bitter ex who'd hacked Horizon Tech out of spite. Tyler, her loyal attack dog, fueled the narrative, whispering to elite guests that Nate was a nobody who'd overplayed his hand. They thought they could rewrite the scandal, bury the truth under caviar and champagne. Nate had other plans. In his Old Town loft, Nate opened his Gala_25 folder. It wasn't a weapon like Backup_23. It was a mirror, reflecting the West's arrogance back at them. He'd spent weeks preparing, collaborating with Zach Delaney, whose Seattle Times expose had already shaken Horizon Tech. Zach had a new lead, a whistleblower from Horizon's finance team, emboldened by Sarah Lynn's courage, ready to confirm David Crow's fraud. Nate's role was simpler but sharper. He'd ensure the gala's guests saw the truth in a way they couldn't ignore. The Bayside Club buzzed with Seattle's power players, tech moguls, bankers, politicians, sipping martinis under a canopy of fairy lights. Emily entered in a midnight blue gown, her chin high despite the whispers trailing her. Ellen greeted guests with practiced warmth, while Tyler worked the room, deflecting questions about the scandal with a grin. The stage was set for a keynote by a family friend, a senator praising the West's resilience. Nate, in Portland, watched via a live stream he'd tapped into, his laptop humming softly. At 9:15 p.m., as the senator took the podium, the venue's digital backdrop flickered. A video began, unscripted and unapproved. Zach's voice narrated, calm and cutting. The West family stands for legacy, but what's their true cost? Clips followed court filings from Horizon's fraud probe, Sarah's testimony about Emily's blackmail, a leaked email from Ellen urging board members to bury the hacker story. The final frame showed Nate's old cybersecurity pitch, stolen by Emily, time-stamped months before her breakthrough. The video ended with Zach's sign-off. Truth doesn't bend to wealth. Thanks to an anonymous source, it's free tonight. The room imploded. Guests whispered, some leaving mid-speech. Ellen's smile froze, her wine glass trembling. Tyler stormed the tech booth, barking at staff, but the video was untraceable, uploaded via Nate's encrypted script. Emily stood rooted, her face a mask of defeat as a cousin hissed, "You brought this on us." The senator, sensing disaster, cut his speech short, exiting to scattered applause. Social media lit up, the video going viral on X within hours, tagged #Westfall. Blogs called it the gala takedown of the decade. Nate closed his laptop, the ocean's crash outside his window a fitting soundtrack. He hadn't attended, hadn't gloated. His victory was in the silence he'd left behind, a silence that screamed louder than Ellen's denials. But the next morning, Emily arrived in Portland. She stood outside his loft, rain-soaked, her designer coat clinging to her frame. "Nate," she said, voice raw, "I lost everything. The firm, my family's respect, my future. But I never stopped loving you. We can fix this." Nate met her gaze, seeing not the woman he'd loved but the architect of her own ruin. "You didn't love me," he said, calm as the tide. "You loved what I could do for you. I fixed it, Emily, by letting you face yourself." She flinched, tears mixing with rain, but he didn't waver. "Go home. There's nothing here for you." She lingered, then turned, her heels clicking into the mist. Nate shut the door, the sound final. The fallout rippled. Horizon Tech fired David, settling lawsuits to avoid collapse. Emily faced a civil suit from Sarah, her career a memory. Ellen's social circle shrank, her legacy a punchline. Tyler's threats fizzled. No lawyer could pin Nate to the leaks, his tracks too clean. Nate, meanwhile, thrived. He launched a coding school for Portland's underserved youth, teaching kids to hack not for chaos but for change. His loft, once a hideout, became a hub of laughter and possibility. One evening, Nate walked the cliffs with Leo, the food cart owner who'd become a friend. "Heard the Wests are selling that big house," Leo said, tossing a stick into the waves. "Guess money can't buy everything." Nate nodded, the sunset painting the sky gold. "It buys a cage," he said, Truth buys freedom. He'd won not by destroying but by building, by proving a quiet man with a laptop could outlast a dynasty. The Wests had laughed at him once. Now the world laughed at them, and Nate was already writing his next chapter.